We light up the world. We light up the world.
You're listening to IBNX. IBNXradio.com.
Welcome to Fire to Inspire. I'm your host, Angel Yasmin. You are listening to Next 411 on IBNXradio.com. Our goal is to inspire you to ignite your passion and purpose. We will direct you for greater happiness, love, relationships, health, and fulfillment. Let's focus on your superpowers, values, core beliefs, and help determine what's important for your next chapter in life. All right, it's getting real hot up in here. Let's fire away. Welcome back, Atlanta. It's your girl, Angel Yasmin. Thank you for tuning in every Thursday on Fire to Inspire, on each Thursday from 1 to 2 p.m. on IBNXradio.com, Next 411. Today, we're highlighting and recognizing Domestic Violence Awareness Month. October is a very emotional month for me because we have Breast Cancer Awareness Month, then we have Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and these two subjects are very hard to talk about, especially domestic violence, because this is something that I know people close to me, also myself, have endured, and so this is going to be very touchy, but we want to talk on subjects that are hard to attack because we want to overcome and get strength and be courageous enough to get out of the situation that we're in. If we're in any kind of abusive relationship, any abusive situation, that you have the strength and courage to get out if you're in it right now. We have a special guest right here with me. Her name is Yaz Franco. What's going on, girl? How you doing?
Hey, girl. Hey. Thank you so much for having me on the show.
Yes,
so excited.
Yes. Well, I'm excited to have you, and thank you for sharing your story today because I know this is not the easiest thing to talk about. But this is what Fire to Inspire is all about because we want to hit those taboo subjects head on because this is how we are able to grow in strength as well. So what is domestic violence? Domestic violence is an abusive behavior which is based on unequal position of power and control. So domestic violence can include a range of behaviors used by a person to control another with whom they love or have had or a close or family relationship. It doesn't matter. Any kind of relationship. It doesn't matter your age. It doesn't matter your race, your gender. Anybody can take on these many forms such as physical, psychological, economic, sexual, emotional, and often be a combination of a lot. Like spiritual abuse is there, mental abuse, physical abuse, it doesn't matter. It hit home to me. So excuse me if I, get a little shaky today because this is really not the easiest thing to talk about because when you've gone through this and you had to overcome, it kind of travels along with you. Can you agree with that?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. So tell us about your encounter with domestic violence.
My experience?
Yes.
Well, I was young. So I got married really young at the age of 19. And I was in love with my husband. I really, really cared about him. And he just was, at first it wasn't like physical, But then it became physical once we were actually married. But it wasn't like I decided to stay because it was, I guess it wasn't like I decided to stay because it was something I wanted to do or I expected anything different. It was just
right.
like my understanding of what marriage was like you work through the good and the bad. And so to me, that was just in that time, I was 19, but in that time, in that space, it wasn't, oh, she's staying, because a lot of times we look at women that stay in those situations and we're like, oh my gosh, they're so dumb. It couldn't be me. I wish they would.
Right.
I wish it would, whatever.
Yes.
It was, what I understood about marriage was that marriage was you take the good and the bad and you pray that together you guys can have a better outcome. But with that said, it didn't start off that way. It was, we fell in love.
Yes.
And we really believed that we were meant to be together.
Mm-hmm.
And even though I kind of knew he had a temper, I never expected that temper to turn around on me.
Right. So you were 19 years old when you got married, right? And before you got married, did you see any signs?
Right.
Because I heard you just say you didn't see any, but tell the truth. Did you see any kind of anger, flare-ups,
no,
or
that's
anything
what I'm saying.
like
Like
that?
he had a temper. He was young too. He wasn't that much older than me.
Right.
He was 20, 21, I believe, when we were together. So it wasn't like he had a temper, but he never had a temper with me.
Okay.
So in my head, it was like, no, he would have never done that to me. He has a temper, but that's just who he is.
Right.
He loves me, and he's not going to turn around and do that to me.
Right.
And so that was that was kind of where everybody would be like, well, you know, he's really got a bad temper. Like, aren't you? I'm like, no, well, he loves me. He would never do that to me.
We're going to speak up for the people that we love.
Yeah.
And sometimes people say, oh my God, you're such a fool in love. But trust me, all of us have been a fool in love. And if you have not, you didn't experience real love. To me, that's just me. But, you know, the thing is, abuse doesn't matter who it abuses. Because when I look at a person that abuses another person, I feel like they've gone through something before. Mm-hmm. They may be the best person in the world. Mm-hmm. You know, I've encountered abusive relationships, and it's been a pattern, not now, you know, because I had to break that cycle, that generational habit. But the thing about it is, a lot of us don't realize that we're in abusive situations and we just let it slide. Right? So when you first was engaged with abuse the first time, how did that feel, and how did that affect your relationship?
I was in shock. I was in complete shock. I remember the first time like it was yesterday. Like, literally. I was in complete shock. We had gotten into an argument, and it went from 0 to 100 real quick. And next thing you know, I had gotten smacked, and that was it. Like, that just happened. And then that was just, I was just in shock. I was like, I can't believe that this just happened, that this is my reaction. I didn't know what to do. Like, do I tell someone? Do I not tell someone? Like, I had so many emotions because I love this man.
Right.
You know, like,
I know.
What? Like, did that just happen? Like, is this real? Am I asleep? Am I awake? That's how I felt. I didn't know. I didn't even realize that he had struck me until the argument was over.
Now, let me ask you a question. What kind of abuse, if you don't mind, what kind of abuse did you experience? Was it physical? Was it emotional? What was it?
It was physical. He wasn't so much emotional. In this specific case, like, I knew he came from an abusive background. Like, he had dealt with abuse as a child.
Yes.
And so, not making any excuses for him.
Of course.
But when it came to that scenario of control, like, he was very adamant about how he wanted somebody to be. And
familiar.
How he wanted to be treated, because he had dealt with abuse, and he's not going to let somebody treat him any type of way.
Right.
Basically. Mm-hmm. And so at some point, I'm the youngest of 6 kids. I'm a woman. I was raised by a single mother. I'm a very independent type A alpha female.
Right.
So I'm not going to let anybody talk to me any type of way.
I get it.
And so when everything happened, it was that. It was the my alpha met his alpha, and he wasn't going to let my alpha out alpha him. So he had to strike it down. So it was always physical. It was never so much emotional. And the crazy part of it all is that I knew in my heart of hearts that he was sincerely sorry. He just didn't know how to not be that way because he never learned how to be any different.
Absolutely. And how did that affect you, though? So being in that relationship.
Right. That affected me in the sense of it made it really hard to walk away because of the unconditional love. It wasn't even fear. Really? It was the fear of knowing, like, man, I know what this man is capable of if he just learned how to love different.
I feel like I know your spirit, and you and I have like similar spirits. We're spitfires. Mm-hmm. And to be honest, we are type A women. Like, we don't take no shit. Let's just be honest. But a lot of times, the people that are around us that we say we're going through abuse, and this is very taboo. Like, people say, oh, you know, she got that personality. She deserves to be knocked down.
Right.
But nobody deserves to be hurt.
Absolutely.
I don't care who you are. So you're telling me because I'm a woman, I'm not a passive woman at that, and I'm a woman that's independent, and I don't mind sharing my opinions, but you're telling me that I'm not allowed to speak up when I'm being hurt, when I'm being cheated on, when I'm being abused.
Right.
So what are you supposed to do with those type of relationships? Because I know you've confided in some people. Did they ever give you some backlash, or how did they support you in all of this? Or did they?
At the time, a lot of people didn't know. At the time, I didn't tell absolutely anybody. Not so much out of fear for him. It was more so like fear for me. Like, I grew up very family oriented. I grew up within like a 5-mile radius. You can find somebody that I'm related to in my neighborhood. So my family, every weekend we got together. My family was very into each other's lives. Like, I grew up in that. I was in the military throughout this episode of my life. When I went to my first duty station in Texas and I got separated from my family, he was the only family I had.
There it is.
I didn't have anybody else. There was nobody I could confide in and tell my story to. And if I did, by the time they got on a plane and got to me, I can only imagine what he would have thought. You know what I'm saying? Just the things like of you went and told your family about me and our stuff and our marriage life, and now you're getting people involved in our marriage situation.
And that's a tough position to be in.
And it was like, okay, well, do I tell people about my marriage situation? I mean, I know that I'm married now. Like, my whole thing was like, I'm married now. I'm a grown up now. Mm-hmm. I was 19 and I swore I knew it. I'm a grown up now. I'm married now. And eventually I got pregnant, and I was pregnant by my husband in an abusive relationship. Wow. Who do I call and tell? They're going to be like, well, you married him. You wanted him. That's your bet. You know, in my head, that's what I was telling myself. Like, who's really going to hop on a plane and come out here and drag me out of the situation? Like, who? I'm the youngest of, and the crazy thing is everybody's like, well, you're the youngest of 6 kids. You're the only girl. You have 5 older brothers. Like,
that
at
will
any
beat
point,
him down.
yeah. I have no doubt that my brothers would have tried to, you know, come out and take care of me. But then again, I was a grown-up. I'm not your responsibility anymore.
Right.
You know, and I think that's the problem with our culture, where we tell people, you know, when you turn 18, you're a grown person. You're not anybody's responsibility anymore. So now, you know, and that's just the minority culture. We kick our kids out my mom didn't kick me out. I joined the military at my own free will. We push our kids out of the nest at 18 and tell them that they're an adult and tell them that they have to figure out how they're going to do their things on their own. And when stuff like this happens, it's like it's been embedded in your head. Well, at 18, I'm a grown-up. I'm no longer XYZ's responsibility. Right. I have to figure this out on my own.
That's hard. And you know, it's so many people at all ages.
Ooh, I didn't expect to cry.
No, it's okay. Cry. It's okay. This is therapeutic. To share your story is actually therapeutic. But a lot of people, the reason why I asked you, how did it affect you? And who did you confide in? When I found myself in those abusive situations, it was hard because I'm a prideful person, meaning like I want to be perfect Patty. I don't want to look like this and that and the other, but we've got to cut that mess out. It's got to be somebody in the family or a friend that we can confide in and let it out, because that one person could save our lives, because there's so many people that die each year going through domestic violence and we don't talk about it. This is a silent killer.
Right.
And people don't realize, I don't care what the degree is of abuse, all of it's abuse.
Right.
And where does it stop? And the thing is, I just don't want people that are actually going through this right now, I don't care what form it is, you need to open up to somebody. Mm-hmm. Somebody needs to know. When you hold all that in, all that pain in, it's hard, right? I mean, It's hard to hold it in.
It is.
It affects you. It blows up and you implode from the inside out.
And then another thing is, like, when you do decide to tell, you know, my whole thing was, like, his friends knew. His friends.
I'm sure.
They knew. They were there. They witnessed it.
Oh, my God.
And they would allow it. Like, there was this one time, like, in the kitchen, like, his friends were playing video games. Like, they were playing video games, hanging out. Thank you. I just remember, I don't know what I did. I mean, I'm sure I did something that, like, was irritating. You know, I think I wanted everybody out the house. I was pregnant. I just wanted them out the house.
You were going through
like,
your
get out the house. Like,
stage.
y'all, like, get out. And I think I did something, like, disrespect him in front of his friends. And, like, we were in the kitchen, and it just turned into something that it didn't have to turn into. And, like, his friends were there. They can see into the kitchen. They could witness this. And they did absolutely nothing.
That's because they're used to it.
And
you
then,
probably did this more than once, but go ahead.
Like, you know, nobody did anything in that moment. And that was another thing. I was like, man, you got these grown men watching this other grown man beat his pregnant wife. And then it turned into, and then it'd be that, you know. But you think that, okay, so if I were to tell anybody, it's not like anybody cared, because you got these people in the house and they didn't even do anything. So it was one of those situations where it was like, man, do I need to tell anybody? Like, to be honest. Eventually I did get out of that situation, though. And it took me leaving for him to get the help that he needed. Because now he's amazing. Like, now he has a wife, he has a family, he remarried, he's doing very well. Like, he is not a bad guy. It took that experience of me getting fed up and leaving for him to get the help he needs. So I tell the women that are dealing with that right now, like, if you're afraid to leave because you're afraid for your life and you genuinely love this individual, maybe you separating yourself from the situation is not only going to help you, but it's also going to maybe, I mean, depending on this individual, trigger something in them to say, hey, I need to change. I just lost my family. Like, my wife and kids just wiped out on me, and I need to figure out what I need to do to fix myself. Right. And he did that. I mean, it's sad to say that that's our story. Like, hey, he was violent. I got fed up. Eventually, I ended up leaving that situation. But it took me leaving and getting a restraining order against not just from me, but my child, for him to be like, yo, I need help. And he went and got the help that he needed. And now he's doing well. So
that's good. That's good.
And I mean, and he and I, we co-parent very well. Like, I never, after that, like, we're good. Right. So my whole thing with domestic violence, too, is women that have dealt with it, like, don't let it define you.
There you go.
Don't let it be what people know of you or know you as, and that's it. Like, oh, she's like this because she used to get beat, and now she just hates all men, and she's just bitter, and da-da-da-da-da. Acknowledge that you went through that. Okay, yes, this is my story. My story was that from this year to this year, I got my ass beat. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. And not beat a little bit, like disfigured my face. Yeah. Mm-hmm. You know? I went through what I need to go to heal, and then now you can't even tell that that's my story unless I tell you. No one knows unless I say, hey, I've been through that type of situation, because people say, you don't act like you've been through that type of situation. No, you're so happy.
You're social butterfly. Like, you don't meet a stranger. I mean, when we met, it was like, what's up, sister? You know?
Absolutely. You know, it does not define me. It does not define me. I'm not going to let anybody control any part of me.
Absolutely.
At all, ever again. And so that's just where I'm at. Like, no situation is going to determine my character. It's going to demeanor my character. I am who I am, regardless of how you treat me. I'm going to treat you the way I know how to treat people, because that's who I am. People may agree with that or not. They're like, well, how could you be so nice to him? Or how could y'all co-parent? Or how could you do this? Right. He was such a, caca head to you. But in my, how he was to me does not dictate who I am. Right. What dictates who I am is how I react to him. If I turn around and say, yeah, you did X, Y, Z, and I still love you, and I still want to make sure that we can share and grow and raise our child in love.
Oh, my gosh. Yaz, you are so big girl. You are so grown
woman. It took a long time to get there.
Honestly, but people don't admit, just because, like, in certain instances, everybody's not going through the same thing that we kind of went through. Your story is kind of similar to mine. Mm-hmm. Being in a situation where you truly love that person because you saw the best in them. And that's what people don't understand. I love the person, even if it was several relationships that I went through an abusive cycle. I love the person that I was with. But did I love myself?
Right.
A lot of times we don't love ourselves and we think, oh, this is love. This looks like love. You know, he buys me gifts. He gives me this. He gives me that. But we have to love ourselves more to know our value, that we don't have to put up with those type of relationships. But at the same time, recognize that those people are good people. I love how you said that. He was a good person. My people were good people. Mm-hmm. You know, everybody's a good person, but all of us have flaws that we just need to correct.
Right.
All of us need to seek help. In some area, all of us are suffering some kind of mental illness. We just don't want to talk about it. But the thing about it is, with anger is the culprit of domestic violence. How can one person change that character in them? Because if that's what they've been taught, what ethnicity was he?
He was Puerto Rican.
I'm sorry?
He was Puerto Rican.
Puerto Rican? Okay. Mm-hmm. And a lot of families...
He is. He's not dead or anything.
I know.
He is Puerto Rican. I know. He is Puerto Rican. But I don't even think ethnicity matters. I think it's more... In his case, I can only talk about my case. I can't talk about every domestic violence issue out there. In this specific case, he... unfortunately was raised, his mom is amazing, by the way. She's the best. Mm-hmm. He was abused as a child by a father figure. And so that's just what he understood love to be. If I love you and you don't act right, I must get you to act right by beating you till you get to act right. Yeah. You know what I'm saying?
I get it.
And so that was his understanding of what love was. In his head, that's what love was, because that's what he was taught. Like I said, it took a drastic loss, like not being able to see your kids for X amount of days, and your wife leaving you, and you losing your car, and you're this, and you're that, and you putting, for him to be like, yo, this is not okay, this isn't normal, this is not okay. When that happened, and he changed, he got to heal, and he got to go to counseling, and he did his stuff, and while he was doing that, I went through my phase. Absolutely. I went through my phase of not trusting anybody. I mean, I wasn't perfect. It wasn't like I left him and I was like, okay, I forgive you, and I go about my life.
Yeah, you had to go through that transformation.
I went through a very, very dark phase after that, a very low trusting phase where I trusted no one. I'm hurt, so you're going to hurt phase.
Yeah. Hurt people really do hurt people. And that's another, we're going to definitely tap on that in just a minute.
And then I went through the phase of, I went to therapy. I went to group therapy. Because I was in the Army, I got command directed to go to therapy.
Okay.
That means that, like, the Army made me go to therapy. They paid for it. They made me go. It was an appointment. I had to go. And if I missed it, I got in a lot of troubles. I went to therapy. And, you know, in our culture, therapy is like, no.
Right.
Like, it's not what we do. You better pray, put some Jesus on it, and that's it, you know? But thank God that I had a commander that was a female at the time, and she was like, I don't care what you say. You're going to therapy. Blame it on command. She's like, blame it on me.
Wow.
And get the help that you need. And through that, I learned that I wasn't the only one going through what I was going through. It was group therapy, so there were other women.
Wow.
So I knew I wasn't the only one that felt the way I felt, that was dealing with what I was dealing with. But I turned into the whole, like, do as I say, not as I do chick. I was like, well, why are you're so strong and you're so bold and you can leave him and you can do this on your own. And, you know, I'm talking to other women telling them that, and they're like, you could do it too.
Right.
And so that's kind of how we built each other up. That helped me heal a lot until I finally forgave him. Once I made the decision to leave, which it really took, I didn't make the decision to leave. It took command. Like, when you're in the Army, like, you belong to the military. And so command has a lot to do with, like, making sure you're separated, and they do no contact orders and all sorts of stuff. So when your command is aware that it's happening, they are able to legally take the proper actions to take you out of certain situations. But they have to be aware of it. You have to have the courage to come to command and be like, hey, I'm in this predicament. I ended up coming to formation beat up one day, and like, they were like, that's it. They were like, we can't look left, like, we can't look away anymore. Like, you got a busted lip, you got marks on yourself, like, what's going on? And so I finally opened up. They did a no contact order. I finally got out. So once separated, there's different stages of grief that you go through. And once they settled me into my own, like, they helped me get my own place. I got my own house on post.
So you had full support.
Yeah,
that's good.
from a command. Good. So, right. So, like, you have the support. I think a lot helped that it was a female commander. Not saying that male commanders aren't as good. Yes. I'm just saying that in my case, I feel like that my female commander had my back. Right. I think that she didn't judge me for it. I think that she just did what she, you know, as woman to woman.
She was a woman.
It was a little bit different.
First.
Yeah.
Right.
And so I think that helped a lot in my specific case. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm sure that there's other commanders that are males that are great. Mm-hmm. I just, in my case, my situation, it happened to be a female commander.
That's good.
Yeah. Once I got settled into my own place, I went through, like, this petty phase, you know, where we went to the court system, and we had to, you know, come up with a custody, like, situation.
Right.
And, you know, he wanted to have my phone number, and I had changed my phone number. Yeah. I moved my address. He didn't know where I lived. And the problem with that was that I had a kid with him. So it wasn't like I had full custody. Like, we had shared custody.
Of
so
course.
Like, they would require me to have a phone number for him to contact.
And you just didn't abide by the rules because you weren't.
No,
ready
well, I
yet.
did. I just went around the rules.
Right.
So I got a landline, and I gave him my landline number, but I didn't have a phone at the crib. So, like, I gave him a number because I was legally supposed to give him a number.
Were you afraid for your life?
No,
Is that why you didn't want to contact
at that
him?
point, it was more so like, I just didn't want you to be a part of I wanted you to have no control over what I was doing. I didn't want you to know what I was doing, why I was doing it. It was none of your business. I'm no longer your concern.
There you go.
And it was more like, you know, if I gave him my phone number, what if he called me and I wouldn't have my daughter at that specific time because maybe I wanted to go out with a friend, because when there was no going out with your friend.
Woo, tell me about it.
You know,
Very
or like
insecure.
you're a mom now. Mm-hmm. You're a mom now. So now you got to sit at home and be a mom. So I don't believe that. I don't believe that I have to sacrifice my motherhood or me being a mom, you know, me being a woman to be a mom. I think that you can easily, like, you can balance both. But that's either, like, everybody has their own opinions on that. That's a whole different episode.
I know. It is.
And so I became really petty. I know that for a fact. But then eventually, like, you grow and you get older and you kind of, it took a long time for me to forgive him. So once I got to the point of where I got to forgive this man, like, genuinely forgive him and, like, not hold it against him, then things started to change. The whole hurt people.
Oh my God. We have to stay right there because a lot of times when you're abused, in any situation, it's very emotional. And I'd rather have somebody knock me upside my head than being emotionally abused.
Yeah,
because that right there stays. The scars go away. Some of them, we still have scars. But at the same time, it's where you have to grow mature and say, okay, enough is enough. Okay, when you're being abused in that type of situation that I was in, you were in, sometimes you become abusive.
Right.
You become the abuser. And then that's where you ask the question, does men go through domestic violence?
Right.
So we're going to kind of turn this around on the men because this is very hard for me to say. I'm a truth teller. I don't care. It's just like a wounded dog. It's just like a dog. If you constantly attack and abuse and hurt that dog, what's going to happen to that dog? It's going to start biting back. It's going to fight back, correct? So it's going to become wounded. So when you go into your next relationship, what happens? You are abused. You don't trust anyone. You're insecure. You have low self-esteem, something that you don't want to talk about. But in those next phases of your life, if you have not been healed, so you are very, very blessed because you had people around you that supported you. But I didn't have that.
Right.
Because again, I knew that I was a loudmouth Black woman, and I knew that I was one of those women that if I told, they'd be like, oh, well, she probably deserved that. Right. But it's not true. That's not true. But in those abusive relationships, you become abusive. You learn those abusive behaviors. So what do you do to break that cycle? When you're in that abusive relationship, guys, you got to fight for your life. So when you're in that situation, you're constantly getting beat left and right. I'm talking about drugs, steel toe boots to the rib. What else? I mean, knives being, like I pulled a knife out before, but ended up getting cut. I mean, the thing is we are fighting for our lives and we learn those behaviors. And so what happens if you never go to therapy? If you never talk to anybody about it? If you never open up about it? Oh, yeah, you tell certain people in the family, but they're like, oh, yeah, this and that and the other. You probably deserved it. Not saying that's what mine said, but it's the point that you're hearing these patterns go on and on. So what do? It surfaces. It festers. And so what happens is you think that, okay, I can do this. You think you're invincible. You can do this. You can go to the next relationship. You are showing those characteristics of what you learned. Instead of fighting fair, you're fighting, you're biting back like a wounded dog. And so I'm saying all this to say that it's important, it's imperative that if you have gone through an abusive relationship, if you've never talked to anybody, go seek help because that's what helped me. Also meditation, fasting, getting to know God in a very enormous way because if you don't shed that bad skin off of you, it will carry on in your next relationship. Did you experience that?
I went through a phase of where I'm never going to let somebody get that close.
That's it. Exactly. You're protecting yourself.
At all.
It's
so I would
mode.
Purposely date guys that were not available. Like whether they were already in a relationship.
Wow.
And stuff like that. Like purposely. Like I'd be like one of the literally, I mean it's not my proudest moment, but I remember being that young and being like, all right, well, I don't want a full-time dude in my life because I don't want him to take my space. I had my own house. I purposely would be like, okay, well, you cannot be available. And I would put limits on these dudes. Like, all right, well, you can see me Tuesday, Thursday. That's it. Come on. We're not... Okay. We're that's it. And if you hit me up on a Monday because you're in town or whatever, I wouldn't even give you time of day. I would pretend like you didn't exist, which is a form of psychological abuse because when you have people that all they want to do is feel wanted, which to me is well, you're unavailable anyways. You shouldn't be barking up this tree. So don't be trying to, you know what I'm saying? Don't be trying to don't be trying to act like I owe you something. You got a whole situation. But then that translated into when I woke up and all right, yes, this isn't you. This isn't what you do. This isn't who you are. This wasn't the woman you were raised to be. When it came to relationships, okay, well, now I'm ready to have a real boyfriend. And it turned into, I didn't know how to let that guy get close.
See.
And then I didn't want him to get that close. Right. And then to top it off, I would be okay, I set you boundaries. So this guy was what do you mean that he wanted to give me the world? And it was okay, well, you give me the world, but I don't want it from you. And that messes guys up because guys are so used to, so used to well, if I treat a woman like this, these women should be falling at my feet. Well, I wasn't falling at nobody's feet.
I was hard.
Right.
I became hard. I was what?
Right. And so and it's so funny because, when you treat, unfortunately, it was psychological. It was like the worse I treated these dudes, the more they wanted to be in my life, the more involved they wanted to be in my life. And I was like, and I would just cut them off. Like one day I'm in your life, and the next day I was gone. And then they would go crazy. Like I'm not even trying to be funny, but some of them had to go seek help for the way that I treated them. And that was,
oh my God.
And that's not okay. That was not okay. So when I finally got into snapped out of that and I got back into, my relationship with God and just becoming the woman that he wanted me to be, I acknowledged a lot of this behavior and I apologized to them. Like, hey, I'm sorry I ever treated you like this. I'm sorry that this is your reality. I'm sorry that you had to deal with what I had to deal with back in the day. That's not what you signed up for. But I need this time for me. Right. And I went into like a little hideout where like I didn't date nobody. I just had to discover who I was by myself. Take that time. Yeah. You had to take that. But absolutely, you learn this behavior because out of fear of getting hurt again. I mean, I was married. Like this was the person this was my forever man. Right. Regardless of how the circumstances happened, like in my head, my only example of marriage were my grandparents, and they were married for 73 years. Wow. They were in love. And so to me, like, that's what I want. That was what love was to me. It was through the thick, through the thin, no matter what. So when that happened and I had to file for divorce and I was going through a custody battle and I was going through all this, like my life, my understanding of what love and relationships and marriage was unraveled, and I didn't know what to think of it. And so I was just like, well, I'm never going to allow this to be my reality again. I'm never going to allow me to put myself in this position. You were 19 years
old. You were still, to me, a baby.
Right. I was. To me, I'm a baby. Like, I think about my kid now. She's about to be 11. Like, there's no way in 8 years you're going to be ready for the world. Right. But again, the way that we are raised, by the time you're 18, you can leave the house.
Come on.
You're taught that 18, you're a grown-up. And
exactly.
So now, 18, 19, 20, I think 21, you still a child. Like, to me, you're barely tapping into what adulthood really is and feeling adult responsibilities and being able to emotionally handle them.
Well, how long were you in this relationship before it ended?
We were together for 2 years before it ended. Once it was abusive, I was probably with him for 2 years through the abusive stage.
Okay. And a lot of times we don't know how to leave. I experienced it over and over, 1 year, 2 years straight. That one wasn't as bad, but still, I experienced emotional abuse, physical abuse, and sometimes spiritual, because I would always date out of my race or date people that wasn't necessarily religious, and just because in the name of love. So it's like, I just had to be open to certain things because of what I was attracted to. So that was my bad for overlooking some standards that I should have stuck by.
Oh, you just reminded me of something.
You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Go ahead.
So just to get the cycle. So when women are in domestic abuse, like in domestic relationships or abusive relationships, we kind of tend to attract that.
Yeah.
Like, so that behavior. So I remember dating this guy, and I remember us sitting down and like having a conversation, and he tells me about this time that he struck his ex. And he is like, I just want you to know, I know that you come from a domestic, like, he's like, I know that you come from a domestic situation. Like, I want to be honest with you. I got in an argument with her and I struck her. And she was the mother of his child. So like they still had ties.
Right.
And I remember clearly he had given me, I had a key to his house and everything. Like at this point I was able to come and go as I pleased from his house. And I remember like looking him in the eye and taking the key off my keychain and putting it on the table and like making that conscious decision. Like, I know you care about this guy. I know that he looks good. Yeah. I know that the situation looks good. I know he may be treating you right, but right now where you are emotionally,
it's not safe.
It's not safe. You cannot put yourself in a situation where he has already broken that barrier of striking a woman.
Right.
And he may never do it again. Yeah. But he might.
And that's not a chance that you wanted to wait on.
And I wasn't ready to find out if that was the situation. So I remember putting the key down, putting on his coffee table and saying, look, I love you. Like, I genuinely care about you. But, like, I am not emotionally equipped to handle this.
Gosh, that's good.
And I walked away. And maybe he would have never struck me. maybe he would have never, maybe he would have loved me. He would have been the best husband ever. I don't know. Right. I wasn't finna find out. Women who stay in these situations that they leave an abusive man and they get into another relationship and then they find themselves in the same situation. At some point, you knew that it was a possibility again before he strikes you. He's either told you his history, you've picked up a red flag that old boy used to do, you looked at it straight in your face, you saw it. Mm-hmm. You have to put yourself first in those situations and say, hey, I'm not going to be another statistic. Like, we're not going to go through this as a pattern. It's not going to be I'm going to hump from one abusive boyfriend to another.
So you were brave. And that's the thing. I was so naive. I was so kind. You know, like I just saw past everybody's flaws. And even today, I have to kind of like, okay, there's some people out there that are not bad. I mean, that are bad people. Right. So like, take it for what it is. But when you're that naive, when I was younger, I always dated older men. Mm-hmm. That was something for me. I don't know. I was very mature. I didn't want to deal with the riffraff, the people in school. Like, I want a real man. I don't know why. I don't know. If you ain't, and I was a sapiosexual, so if you couldn't talk to me intellectually, we were not going to have a conversation. So I was just too grown for my own panties. Right. But at the same time, being young and dating older men puts you in a box of control. Yes. Because you were younger. And I had this young phase, like, I was a spitfire, but at the same time, they knew I was younger and they took advantage of that sometime, you know? Mm-hmm. So that's why I married somebody a little bit younger this or my age, not younger, but just, like around my age, so we can both thrive together and we won't be taking, advantage of each other because of age. Yeah. But a lot of people stay. They might have children. They may not have financial stability. That's another one. That's hard to leave something and you don't have a job, or you may not be the breadwinner in the house. A lot of the women are not leaving because of that.
Or if they are, they give control of the accounts to their husbands.
Right. And then a lot of times, again, we're naive and we're not really looking at the situation. Oh, he loves me. He only does that when he drinks. You heard of that one? He only does this when he's smoking or whatever the case may be. But listen, you cannot avoid the monster. If the monster is there, what are you going to do? I'd rather you run. I don't care, because the man in a lot of relationships start off that way and then they get married and they think, oh, it's going to change because I'm his wife now or I'm the husband now. But that's not always the case. Yeah. I love how you were brave enough to say, you know what, I'm going to pump the brakes here. Mm-hmm. You knew your value. And when you know your value, you don't let everything just fly. Right. And that's what a lot of people are doing right now. They're ashamed. They don't want any, how do I say this? They don't want any
stigma. They don't want a stigma.
There you go.
Like,
I was upset. And then you don't, judgment. There you go, judgments.
You don't, like, everybody's like, oh, you don't want to be a statistic. You don't want to be a statistic. Like, I'm a Hispanic woman. Like, it is, unfortunately, women in my culture are known to be in those type of relationships. And it was like, well, do I say something and become a statistic, or do I stay quiet and just deal with it? Like, right now on my live, some people that have been in my family that know me since I was a little girl, they're probably finding out right now that this is my story. Right. Because I just never talked about it. Because I don't want to have the...
It's a very private matter.
What were you thinking when you stayed that longer? All of those things that happen, like, all of that is irrelevant. It all comes down to, like, unconditional love. And, like, understand, like, for me... And I have 2 daughters. And for me, it's like, I want them to understand, like, I love you unconditionally. Right. Regardless of what you're thinking, what you're doing. There's nothing you can do that'll stop me from loving you. Mm-hmm. And there's nothing you could do that'll stop me from coming and being the hero. Right. And so, like, that'll stop me from coming and helping and saving you in a certain situation. I'm not saying that my mom didn't do that, because my mom was very, very adamant, but my mom was a woman. I feel like maybe if I had a closer relationship with my older brothers, because my older brothers were way older than me, they weren't raised in the house with me. Right. So, like, I knew they were there, but, like, to me, their love was always, like, conditional. Nothing against my brother. I love my brothers. They are the best brothers I could ever ask for. By the time I was a grown-up, they had their wives, their kids, their situations going on. Like, I was not a priority in their lives anymore.
I get it.
They were my dads, because my dad really wasn't in the picture. So they were the guys that raised me. But once they got married and had their own kids, it was like, where do I fall? And it was very hard when everything happened for me to call them for help. And it's still hard for me to call them for help.
And when you're in that situation, I know that sometimes we pray that it gets better. I was very spiritual. Oh, I was a spiritual ball of fire. And I just knew that God could change that situation. And he could. But see, the thing is, we don't serve a monster. We don't serve somebody that just comes in on us. We have to let that in. And any person that wants to change, they have to confess that they're going through that problem, and they have to say, you know what, I want to change, and make steps. Because all the time we heard, well, I won't do this anymore. I won't do this anymore. But now it's time to take action. And if you are not seeing that action come forth, it's time for you to move on.
Right, absolutely.
Because even though God is supposed to be there, and I was a praying wife, I was a praying girlfriend, I always saw the best in people, but don't be so kind that you're blind.
Right.
Because I was like that for years, and the more that you stay in it, the more torment that you will have to get out of later. You get what I'm saying? I really want to say thank you for sharing your story. It has been truly an inspiration to hear it. Thank you for being brave enough to share it. But now let's talk about going into healing. Like, what were some things that you actually did? I know you went to therapy, but like, tell a little bit more in detail on how you healed from this.
So I healed faster than he did. He still had a lot of anger and animosity towards me because I went through my petty phase. So I know that while we were together, he was the abuser. But when we separated, I became the bad guy at certain point towards him specifically. And so he was still angry about a lot of stuff. And so I remember like on the phone, and he was like yelling about something. And I was like, dude, I forget. Like, I was like over, and I was like, you know what? I forgive you.
Good.
like I forgive you. Like, now the ball's in your court, because whatever you want, however we're gonna co-parent with this with our daughter, like, let's do it, and let's just make it happen. In that time, my daughter was still really, really young. He still wasn't ready to be my friend or be like anything. He was still very angry at me. But at that point, I was more lenient to certain things with our daughter, because we had like a set plan by the judge. Like, we would pick her up at one point, drop her off at one point. Like, we would do very different. Eventually, I let him find out where I lived. So now you can drop her off at the house. Little stuff like that, where I was just like, you know what? This is it. Like, I'm not going to carry this anymore. Something else that I did was I would look at myself in the mirror. I learned self-defense. Fun fact. I ended up becoming an MMA fighter for a few years.
Wow, that's good.
After that, because I took a self-defense class, and then that turned into something else, and then I learned jiu-jitsu, and then I ended up on like the All-Army Combatives team for like Fort Hood, which is really, really crazy, because like that wasn't my ministry at all, and it ended up something that I did, and now I have like these brothers from the fight team that are like everything to me. You know what I mean?
Good.
So it was like the enough story. Everybody called it the enough story, because like I went from domestic violence to learning how to fight like strategically and right. And that was my outlet. Wow. And I think through that, I built my confidence as a woman. Like, I became a woman that was strong.
There you go.
And I was a fighter, and I was on a winning team. Like, we won first place at a tournament.
Awesome. That's so good.
For All Army. So when that happened, I healed. And it was so crazy, because there were moments where I would get struck in the face and I'd have PTSD and I'd be bawling, crying, and the guys would be like, yo, I didn't do anything to her but spar.
I get it.
You know, but I'm so grateful that I ended up on that team in that specific time, because like during that time they started free self-defense classes.
Okay, good.
So I would go to the self-defense classes, and they saw that I was kind of like pretty good at it, and one of the guys that knew me, he was like, hey, you should try out for like our team. And I was I don't think I'm ready to like fight for real. And he was like, just try out. And when I tried out, I ended up doing it, and then that turned into something else, and my confidence got built. So
that's good.
And then I knew that no matter what, like whether I'm on the team or not, like now I know, like now I go into a relationship and I don't fear
there you go.
What I'm going to do.
Because you're more confident, you're empowered.
Right.
And forgiveness can be a very difficult thing, but it's a must. In order to heal emotionally, spiritually, physically, you have to forgive yourself, because a lot of times we want to blame ourselves because we put ourselves in that situation or we stayed in that situation. But to overcome it all is to forgive yourself first, and to forgive the other person, whoever hurt you, even though you didn't get an apology. I didn't get an apology, and that's a hard pill
I got
to
an
swallow.
apology.
I know you
9 years later.
Yeah,
last year.
Wow.
He called me on my phone, and he gave me like a 4. Like, it wasn't the I'm sorry you get after every beating, you know, like the I'm sorry, I'll never do it again. Yeah, it wasn't that. It was like the I want to apologize to you
Right.
for everything. And now that I have daughters, I see the men that I don't want them to ever be with. I'm sorry that I ever put you through that. You don't deserve, you never deserved to be struck. You never deserved to be talked to in that manner. Like, I mean, he went through
That's so good.
fine combing. But it took him 9 years to say that.
9 years.
I couldn't wait 9 years to heal.
Wow. And
Right, he had to heal.
Yes,
Like,
that's it. That's
like,
it.
So recommendations, when you walk away, when you make the decision, nobody's going to come and save you. You have to save yourself in these situations. You have to want it for yourself.
You gotta want
Forgive yourself for allowing that to happen. Forgive the other individual without an apology. And maybe you will get it, but maybe you don't. But know that you don't need it.
You don't need it to validate who you are. Just know that you're beautiful and that you are courageous and that you can get through anything if you just fight for it. I want you to keep fighting. And if you're one of those people that are experiencing domestic violence, please call the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-7233. Get help without saying a word. You don't have to stay there. You can make a decision to say, you know what, I can change the situation that I'm in. You are not the definition of that situation.
Right.
So don't let it define you. Keep going. Search for God. Keep God in your heart. And I promise you, everything will be okay.
And you're not alone.
Yes, you're not alone.
You're not alone.
You're not
There's
alone.
women going through this all over unfortunately, all over the world. But know that you're not alone. And if you tap into the right resources, you're going to find that community that's going to help you. I had a community to help me get out of my situation.
Yes.
I just completely support you guys. You guys can message me, whatever. If you guys need that direct, if you like my story, whatever you guys have to do, like, I'm here to help you get out of whatever situation you guys have or support you through the process, whatever it is. I make myself available for that.
Well, yes, please tell people how they can reach you on social media, online, all that good stuff. And also tell them about your music business, just slightly, because we have to get off air a little bit too.
Good.
So yeah.
I do music marketing now. I'm gonna have my own business called the Notum Group, and you guys can follow me at I am Yaz Franco. Very easy. I am Yaz Franco, all together, one word. Yes. And yeah, that's the quickest way to get a hold of me. Really, is IG is at I am Yaz Franco.
Well, thank you so much, guys. Thanks for joining us live. All right, I'll catch you next week. It's getting real hot up in here because we are so fired up.